Hello everyone and welcome to another quick tip from Dashboard Gear. Today we're going to be talking about Excel pivot table conditional formatting. So following in the spirit of giving you some just kind of simple quick tips that you can kick up your reporting and business intelligence skills, we're going to be covering a feature inside of Excel, since I know many of you use Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and share Excel. Now, what I've done here is I've started with a pivot table that I created against our general ledger summary cube that has actuals, as you can see in column B, prior year amounts, and column C, and then I created a variance in column D for each account. And, just like you've seen in past videos where you can navigate through, pick different periods and months and years and so forth through the filters, you can do that. So it's just a live connected view to our cube on the general ledger side. Now, these are all great and fine, and this is what most people do, is create these reports this way. But perhaps you want to make some of the values a little bit more distinct or stand out in such a way that you can take a little bit better action to them. Now, we're going to cover in future sessions things like how to create report actions to where you can link this to another report to get details and some of those things. Today, what I want to talk about is how do you conditionally format the cells to make them stand out or give this spreadsheet a little more life. So what we're going to do is I'm going to highlight the column that I want to do something with. So for instance, in this particular value, I want to see variance, and these variances are just a bunch of numbers. If I click on a number, you're just going to see it here. But what is built into Excel, if you go to the home menu, you're going to see a section at the top called conditional formatting. Now, Excel has a number of tools and a number of different ways of doing this. I'm just going to show you a few different ways just to give you the spirit of it, and then you'll be able to play with it. And hopefully you'll get enough of the concepts that you'll be able to try some different things and see it that way. If I look at conditional formatting under this, what you're going to see is a drop down where we have a number of options where we can have things jump out by color, by data bars, by icons, all these different things. So I'm just going to do a few of these. Now, you can do something like highlight a whole column and do it, but what I have found is the best thing to do, or the easiest thing to do in a cube pivot table, is just highlight the first value that you want to set it for. So I'll just say my variance here on this first column. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a highlight rule, and we'll start with that. I'll just say greater than. So anytime that the value is greater than 0, I want it to be green. So my current year is higher than my prior year. And I'll say, okay. Now I didn't do anything on that one because it's 0. But I'm going to highlight again and say highlight again and say anytime it's less than 0, I want it to be red. Say, okay, well, it's not either one. But now you'll notice a little menu here next to it that flies down. And if I click that, one of the options, the third one down, is do this to all cells showing variance. So if I click that, it is now going to go through my spreadsheet and highlight all rows. Now I noticed there's one here that it didn't do for some reason. So what can you do when it does that? Well, the first thing you can do is you can come up to the conditional formatting option that's here. And anytime you want to edit any of the conditional formatting, you just click the value that says manage rules here. And when I do that, it shows me all of the conditional formatting rules that you have in your spreadsheet. Why did my green one not kick in? Well, what happened was I can see here that it's just being D5, where it's just doing the one cell up above there. It didn't copy that down. So I need to figure out why was that. So if I click the red one, for instance, and I say edit rule, what you're going to see is the rule applies to all cells, showing that. That makes sense. So if I say okay there, if I click the green one and say edit rule, it didn't copy that down to the other ones, but I can just go ahead and click the all cells showing value. Now when I do that, say okay, now all my positives are there. So anytime I have found that something's not quite right, usually what you can do is you can troubleshoot it by going to conditional formatting, manage rules, and it will show you all your rules, and you just kind of look through it that way. Now, that's the first type of formatting I wanted to show you, which is basically just simple highlighting colors. Now, you can customize that, all kinds of different fonts and colors, and go crazy. I just use the defaults that it came up with red and green, the kind of the traditional traffic lighting. There's other quick hit options where you could do scales where it'll do it based on a percentage of the values, and it'll do red, green, and yellow, that kind of thing. So there's some built-in color scales that way as well. But instead, what I want to do is say, okay, let's say I want to kick this up another notch and give it some more picture kind of view to the world. If I go ahead and I go to this first cell and I go back to conditional formatting, I can go to another option here, which is an icon set. So an icon set is just like a color value. The difference on this is it will give you some indication to the direction that something is going, and it tends to look a little better. So it's not necessarily a good or bad, but it's also a good bad with a direction to it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick directional to that, and you'll see that a little green arrow came up. Now, a zero variance isn't a green arrow. So what do I want to do anytime I want to change kind of the handling of that? I go back here to my rules. I manage the rules, and I'll notice here on my icon set, if I click that one and do edit rule, it gives you the dialogue of what to do in each case. So now what I want to do is I want to set the rules to that. So basically I want to say, make it a green arrow when the value is greater than 0. Now, by default, it says % here, but I'm going to say instead a number. So if it's greater than 0, then I'm going to make it a green arrow. When it is this middle option, I'm going to say no option. I don't want any arrow if it happens to be 0 on that. So I'll just say nothing there. And then make it a red arrow when it's below 0. So now if I say OK and OK again, my arrow went away. And the reason for that is it's not greater than or less than, so no arrow. So now if I come back here to this conditional formatting and do manage rules, click that one and do edit, I want to do that same option I did to the colors and say, do it for all the cells in this column, or all the cells in this value anyway. So if I do that, say OK, now all of a sudden it's adding arrows where appropriate to each of those. Now you can keep the variance amount next to it, but what I like to do when I use the arrows is traditionally I'll take and say manage the rule again, manage the rules, edit. There's an option here for show icon only. If I go ahead and I click that, say OK, now instead of showing the values, it just has the icon there. Now for kicking it up another notch, I tend to put that value next to the value of the actual amount so I can see what it's doing. So basically my variance is going up or down. My prior years, you can see what that is there. Maybe I don't want to see those colors anymore. I just want the arrows. So anytime I want to do anything on any of those rules, remember, just go to this manage rule. And what I can do is I can get rid of the color. Oops, instead of that, I want to do delete. We'll do delete on the colors. And so now we just have our arrows. Now you can follow that same exact thing through things like icon sets that are traffic lights. This, you can create custom indicators and so forth if you really want to get fancy. There's some other ones that are just more directional and not so much color. So you can get a little bit creative on how you want to display them. Now, the last item I'm going to show you is what's called a data bar. Now, the data bars, what they do is they don't so much give you whether it's good or bad, but they give you an idea of the scope or the scale of that. So if I go ahead here and say I want to, on this first one, I'm going to go ahead and do a conditional format. That's a data bar, and I'll gradient fill it. And that data bar showing here, now there's nothing really there on that data bar, and you notice the value came back, and that's because that checkbox by default of just show the icon only isn't there. But if I copy this down you're going to see, I'm going to make the field bigger now that I've got all this stuff in it, a series of bars one way or another here based on the value, if it's good or bad in the direction it is. Now, if I get rid of that arrow, so we're going to go here and manage rules. Let's get rid of our arrow so that doesn't cloud things in here. We have our data bar in here. And just to make it jump out a little more, I'm going to click on this row label. I'm going to filter the values and say, take out anything where the actual, actually I'll do the variance does not equal 0. Or show items which the variance does not equal 0. There we go. And now we have our numbers on the variance with the data bar that's there. And what I might want to do in this case is just like we did before, hide the actual values. So if I edit that, show the bar only, say, okay, now we have our data bar based on that. And it will grow and shrink a little bit based on the size of the column that's in there. So the data bar gives you an idea as to the scope. Now, if I would edit that through just like I did on the manage rules from before, I could create new rules and so forth in that. So you're just going to have to play around with different things. You can format the colors and the negative and all of that. But in general, the things that I find that people get confused by is the copying down to the cells. Make sure that that third option where it's going to include all the cells are there. And if the easiest thing to do is to start with the very first column, set it, and then copy it down. And then if that doesn't copy down like you expect, make sure you check the rules that are there. So those are the basic conditional formatting rules. Gives you to kind of kick up your spreadsheets a bit by having the values stand out, either highlighting colors, highlighting trends or directions, or the size or relativity of the values that are there. So just through some simple settings on that, it'll be there, and it takes effect no matter how you change the data. So that's kind of the beauty of the cube queries, is the data is completely interactive and changing as you navigate through your years, time periods, and so forth. So as always, we thank you for joining us today. We're going to, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to either myself, Rich Bendickson, or Tom Zeidel, as well as if you have any suggestions for future options, you can send that to info@dashboardgear.com, and we'd be happy to give you some suggestions on future. So as always, thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to giving you another presentation next week.